seen such desolation. I think we drove for a mile and there wasn't a building hardly standing.
Nobody knew what was going on. They called the situation fluid, but fluid means that nobody knew anything.
It was different. If I had done something else, I don't know what I would have done.
We're talking today with Matt Reusch of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, Matt, start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Port Huron, Michigan, July 12, 1985.
Okay, did you grow up there?
No, my dad was in the Coast Guard. We moved around a lot.
Okay, so where else did you live when you were growing up?
Washington State, New Jersey, Texas, Colorado, a whole bunch of different places.
All right. Where did you go to high school?
I actually came back to Michigan in 2000. I went to Forest Hill Central.
Okay. And then, now did you finish high school?
I did.
Okay.
And graduated in 2004.
All right. Now, when did you actually sign up in the Army?
March 17, 2003.
Okay. Now, what kind of deal was that? Because you weren't done with high school yet.
The deal was supposed to be I would go do my basic training and come back for my senior year. I wound up staying and completing infantry school and then returning for my senior year. And after I was done with my senior year, I went into the National Guard full-time.
Okay. So we'll back up. Tell us a little bit then about what motivated you to join in the first place?
My family's military. I wanted to do my part, and I was looking for a way to get out of the norm, and the Army seemed like the right way to go.
Now, why the Army over another branch of the service?
It was, I'm a student of history, and I studied warfare all my life as a little kid, and loved the Civil War, and I wanted to see what it was like for myself. So,
okay. Yeah. So in that case, the immediate family history of the Coast Guard doesn't, it does tie in, but only in bits and pieces.
Only marginally.
Yeah. Okay. So you go into the Army. Now, describe basic training for us. Where did you go?
Fort Benning, Georgia, in the summer. It was definitely a culture shock for me. It was pretty intense, I guess, for as basic training should be. Their job is to take you and make you into something that you're not, and they definitely do a very good job down there.
All right. Now, in the old days, training could be rough and abusive and a few other things. What's the more modern version of the Army in terms of turning you into a soldier? 2003,
they were still pretty hands-on. The Army had not yet evolved into the, I don't know what they call it now, but with the war in Iraq just starting, the drill instructors were very focused on making you aware that you were going to go overseas. And so they took every means necessary to make that clear. So we were brought up the traditional way, I guess you could say.
All right. So then, now, how much of that were you expecting when you went in?
I wasn't sure what to expect. I knew that it was going to be hard, and I wasn't prepared for some of it, but you have to catch on quick, I suppose. It was culture shock, but once you're there, and you just deal with it, I guess.
Okay. So it was a lot of the culture shock, just the discipline of the life there? Or?
The discipline was easy to get used to. I think it was working with people from all walks of life being thrown together and then being expected to work as a team right off the bat, and it does not happen. It's a painful learning process the whole time. But eventually things settle down, and you get to know one another, and you do work as a team, hopefully. I was lucky in my case. My platoon came together and we pulled it off.
Okay. What kind of backgrounds do the guys in your platoon have?
It was varied. We had a former Marine from Ireland who was 38 years old. We had guys like me, 17, still in high school. We had guys who were reclassing, just come back from Iraq, who were looking to transition into the infantry. And
there's people who want to go in the infantry?
The infantry is To get into the infantry, the common misconception about the infantry is that you're not that bright, and that is not true at all. There are some very educated people inside the infantry. It's a job that I think has a lot of excitement, and there's a lot of pride in being there. So yeah, people do want to be there. They definitely take a lot of the risks. They spend all the time on the front lines, and they are the ones dealing with your day-to-day life. Whether you're on a COP in Afghanistan or in Iraq, it's a grind.
Okay. Now, in the older Army, say the Vietnam era, one of the attractions of the combat arms was that promotion was faster. Is that?
That is true. You could definitely be a younger soldier leading guys, whether it be because of attrition or because of injuries or just because the slots are there. It's not uncommon for a specialist to be leading a team. I was leading a team after 7 months in Afghanistan, and I was brand new. But you learn pretty quick, and the job of an infantryman is not that hard.
To go back again to the training then, because so part of it is sort of discipline, learning to follow orders, some of it is kind of the teamwork. Well, what kinds of exercises or things would you do where they're trying to get you to work as a team?
Different team building exercises, the obvious ones, the obstacle courses, but the ones that really shape you as a platoon are the ones that come during correctional activities, like smokings. That is when the platoon really has to pull together. When everybody works together, the punishment stops. So those are the team building exercises that really make you into a tight unit. That it's people would think that it happens on an obstacle course or something like that, and that's not true. It would happen in the barracks while you're doing your smoking sessions.
What's a smoking session?
It's pretty much it's a correctional activity. The drill sergeants, if they felt as though you'd done something wrong, or just because you'd wind up doing different exercises until they told you to stop. They could last anywhere from 10 minutes to 4 hours to 5 hours. It just depends on how everybody's doing.
All right. And within the regular training program, how much physical training is there?
A lot. Every morning you got PT. That's your thing. You ruck march, you run, you do everything. It's intensive. They are getting you in shape. Infantrymen are, one of their necessary requirements is that they stay in shape. Their job is very physically strenuous, and you got to stay with it in order to be able to do your job. Okay.
Now, were there people washing out or just leaving?
There were. There were a few people who got failure to adapt. But at that time, the war in Iraq was going on, and we tried to keep as many as possible. But the ones that were unfit, the ones that were hurt, or otherwise they were released. I think I don't remember how many we lost inside my company, but I know there were some that were left. A couple in AWOL. It happens.
Yep. All right. Now, how long did that training go on?
Basic training was 2 months, and then your job school is another month and a half, so about 3.5 months.
Okay, and so the job school, was that infantry training for you?
Infantry training, yep. The nice thing about being an infantryman is you go to Fort Benning and you stay at Fort Benning. It's what they call OSET, one unit station training. You go all the way through with the same group. So it's a nice reward to see you and your friends getting your blue cord at the end of it.
Did they take you any place off the base to give you sort of the right kind of terrain experience? Did they take you up into the mountains at all?
Fort Benning offers has a lot of different terrain, actually. There's a lot of different training areas that we were able to use. We never left the post. We stayed on Fort Benning proper. If you're in a specialized school, then you're looking at going to different types of terrain. But as far as basic training went, that was that. You stayed at Fort Benning.
Okay. All right. Now, in your case, you're going back home after that. So I don't know, what was it like to go back to high school after that summer?
It was interesting. Definitely very interesting. They wanted me to take a gym class when I got back, and I finally got that waived. But it definitely opened up my eyes. I was much more aware of what I had, the hard work that it took to be in the military. Having money was nice. But yeah, it was definitely different. It sets you apart from everybody else. But you're still a student, and but in the end, I think in the back of my mind, I thought I'd be going to Iraq shortly, and what's the deal with high school? It's not a big thing. So I just wanted to graduate and get it over with.
All right. So then, now you say you went full-time into the National Guard at that point. How does that work?
They put me in as a hometown recruiter. I worked with the recruiting command for a little bit. Did not really enjoy it. As a high schooler, I went to other high schools and tried to recruit into the National Guard. And I was still drilling with my unit at the time, in my infantry unit as well. So.
Okay. Now, so you're in with the regular Guard units. Now you've got men who are a lot older than you who were in that, and.
Yep, we had a lot. It was a mixed bag at the time. The Guard still was shaking off the reputation of being weekend warriors with drills, and the problem was they're underfunded. They don't have the same resources that the active duty side of the house would have had. So you had a mixed lot of guys who had just come off of active duty who were transitioning into the Guard. There were really any combat veterans besides a few Persian Gulf ones inside the Guard. So your training was limited. Your experience was limited. It was all by the book. It was all very rudimentary. And that's not their fault. It was just what they had at the time.
Yeah. Okay. Now, were they an infantry unit? Or
Yep.
were they? Okay.
We were at the time we were a heavy weapons company, a Delta company, and as the needs of the Army changed, we became a light company. So that was changing when I left to go active duty.
All right. Now, when you were doing the infantry training and so forth, were they giving you kind of the full range of weapons that you might use, or do you just work with some of them?
No, we worked with just the basics. I think the heaviest we ever broke out was a saw. We'd never used some of the heavier weapons, the 50 caliber, the Mark 19s, or javelins, or whatever else you would have found in an active duty training. We just had the very basics.
Okay. All right. And the saw, just for somebody who doesn't know what that is?
A squad automatic weapon. It's belt-fed, smaller machine gun. It's just it's what you'd have in a infantry squad besides your 240, which is the next step up from that.
Right. Okay. So now you're in, and then how long did you stay in that capacity with the Guard?
It would have been about 2 years. 1 year while I was still in high school, and then the other year after I'd graduated.
Okay. But that basically counted as a full-time job then?
Yes, it did.
Okay, so you didn't have to go out and find something else to do at the same time?
No, I was lucky.
All right. And then was the expectation that at a certain point you would get called to active duty, or is that your choice?
Well, at the time that Michigan hadn't really been sending troops to Iraq. I believe Governor Granholm had decided that she didn't want to send her troops in. At least that's what we were being told, but there were
transportation units. There were support units that were mobilized.
But there was infantry units that were not used.
Okay.
That changed in 2005. A couple of guys from 125 went over. I'm not sure how many went, but I know they sent over, I think it was a full company from Charlie Company 125, and we actually lost 4 of them. And a few of them were my friends, and that's kind of when I started thinking, instead of doing this recruiting stuff, I was getting really old, and I'd wanted to go, but headquarters had said you need to stay with the hometown recruiting, plus, you've already filled the slots. So I just decided to go active duty after that. It was just...
Okay. So then how do you go about doing that?
I just went, talked to an active duty recruiter, told him I was in the National Guard and I wanted to go into the regular Army, and got some papers signed, and next thing I know, I was on my way to Fort Drum.
Okay. And where is Fort Drum?
It's upstate New York, about an hour northeast of Syracuse, 30 minutes from Canada.
Okay. And then who or what was based there?
That's the 10th Mountain Division.
Okay.
There's a couple of brigades there. Most of them have been dedicated to going to Iraq. 3rd Brigade, where I was going, we're going to deploy to Afghanistan. So that was our lot in life.
Okay. Now, what sort of reception do you get? You arrive at Fort Drum, what happens to you?
You show up, you sign in at your division headquarters. somebody from the battalion you're supposed to be going to will come and pick you up. They'll put you in the barracks, and you'll have a sponsor. They'll walk you through what you need, get all your paperwork signed. You'll transition into your company, and from there your platoon. It's a quick process, but it's a little bit scary, not knowing anybody, and being the new guy in an infantry unit's interesting.
Okay. So when you join the platoon, how long have most of those guys been in?
It's a mixed bag. I mean, you have your senior NCOs who've been in for upwards of 10 years, and then your junior guys who've been in for a couple. It's a mixed. I was coming from the National Guard, so my reception wasn't that good. I'd already, some of these guys had been to Iraq, some of them had been to Afghanistan. They looked at the National Guard as not being worth their time, so it was interesting.
All right. Now, were there people who did sort of look after you a little bit or help you along, or did you just kind of have to prove yourself first?
I think it was a combination of both. They pretty much said, you know, we're going to teach you what you need to learn, but you're on your own. We're going to help you. You know, we're going to get you up to where you need to be, but you know, deploying to Afghanistan is no joke. And you know, pretty much whatever we tell you now, you're just going to learn to do in Afghanistan anyway. So that's pretty much what happened.
And how long were you in New York before you got deployed?
2 weeks.
Okay, so there's really not much time for any kind of training exercise or anything else. How did you actually spend those 2 weeks?
Paperwork,
Okay.
drawing gear, medical, pretty much what, you know, getting ready to mobilize for deployment. That's the big thing when it comes to deploying. It's a long process.
All right. So when do you actually leave then?
We left in January of 2006.
Okay.
It had just been the new year, and yeah.
Okay. So now what's the process of getting into Afghanistan?
Well, you fly from Fort Drum to Germany or Ireland. I think we went to Germany. And from Germany you fly to Manas Air Base in Kazakhstan. And from Manas you fly to Bagram. And from Bagram you'll catch a ride to wherever you're going.
Okay. And where were you going?
We were started out in Khost Province, Fob Salerno.
And what sort of part, if you're looking at a map of Afghanistan?
Northeast side,
Okay.
right on the Pakistani border.
All right.
Very mountainous, hilly. It's not all of Afghanistan's a desert. There are some places that are beautiful, have mountains and trees and rivers and snow and rain. We were in a dry, arid, mountainous region. Patrol. We had our sector was about the size of Rhode Island. It was a platoon or 2 platoons patrolling it. So
now,
we had our
how
hands
many
full.
men in 2 platoons?
Well, my Delta platoon had, I think we were close to 18 or 19, and our light company or our light platoon had probably 25 or 30. So not that many to really be doing the job, and that light platoon was under strength. So.
All right. Now, the Delta platoon, were you a heavier weapons
We
platoon?
were a heavy weapons platoon. In the old Army, you would have been an anti-tank platoon. We had our tow missiles and all of that stuff, and we did a lot of mounted patrols, and we did a lot of dismounted patrols. So we were used like a light infantry platoon. So after that, we did a lot of different things.
Okay, talk about mounted patrols. What kind of vehicles do you have?
We had Humvees, just the basic Humvees. We had up-armored Humvees, but it was just the original shell that had some armor on it. And we would patrol different areas. We do presence patrols, we do cordon and searches, we would do any number of things. It all depended on what our task was.
Okay, explain a little bit what these things are. What's a presence patrol, for example?
Presence patrol is simply, you know, making your presence known in different areas, especially where the enemy is. We want them to know that we're here and we're looking for them. And that usually tends to draw them out. Cordon and search is simply sealing off an area and shaking down the locals, looking for things that they shouldn't have, looking for bad guys, all that kind of stuff. We would do puck missions. We would go take people that we had intelligence on and detain them and bring them back to our base, where they would undergo questioning, and then from there they would go wherever. That wasn't our job, but we did a lot of things because our area was so vast. We had a lot of different issues, so we stayed busy.
All right. Now, what how would you characterize the population in the area in terms of just how do they live, or who were they?
They were Pashtuns. They were ethnic Pashtuns. You would have villages, usually, and you had outlying compounds where families would live. Usually the villages would be one main street with a bazaar going down the middle, street market, and very, very dirty. The smell alone was probably one of the things I remember most about Afghanistan. The people generally won't look at you too often, but when they do, it's usually just a very intense look. You don't deal with the women at all. The kids, playful, they like to steal stuff from you, and they love getting stuff handed to them. It's hard to really explain the way that people are there. They're very historic people. They're very tribal. They're very set in their ways, and they're dedicated fighters, and they know their country.
All right. Now, I guess, were you encountering much by way of resistance or opposition?
We ran the gauntlet from having small ambushes to large-scale ambushes. We were starting to see an influx of IEDs, quite a few IEDs of different varieties. And that was probably the one thing that really bothered us, was the different types of IEDs that we were seeing. And they were getting more and more accurate with them. We could also have indirect fire mortars and rockets, and anything that you hear about is we had.
All right. Now, how effective were they?
Their IEDs were pretty good. They had their technology with that. They were very resourceful on how they would make them. They had pressure plates. They had EMPs. They had all of them. Just the basic tripwires. They used them pretty well. As far as their other stuff goes, it was hit and miss.
Okay. Now, were they? I mean, how much damage were they? How much were they doing to you?
They could destroy a Humvee if they hit it right. We at the time had our counter IED stuff. We had our Dukes and our jammers and stuff like that, and things that protected us from remote detonated IEDs. The problem was they had found ways to circumvent that. The pressure plate ones, that was always a problem. The trip wires, finding ways to counteract those were hard. We had quite a few IEDs. We had suicide bombers. We had everything. It was a crazy time.
Now, when you're out there, were you spending the night out in the field or in villages or things like that?
Infantry platoons typically will go out for days. You could go out for up to 3 weeks, up to a month, and you would live off of out of your Humvee. You'd get resupplied if you needed it, and so you spend a lot of time out in your AO.
Okay. And so, what would you do at night?
We'd have security. We'd position our trucks in different positions to provide security. Sometimes we'd pull into a Afghan police checkpoint and set up security, and you'd have guards up at all times, and the rest of the crew would be down, listening to music or doing whatever, and that would be that.
Okay. Now, did you have Afghan interpreters with you?
Yes. Yes, we did.
And were they useful at all?
There were some that were good and some that were bad. They were Afghan locals who had been taught English. They were paid quite a bit of money in their mind, but they still struggled with interpreting for us. I can't imagine that their job was easy. And also, they were viewed as traitors. They're helping out the Americans. So it was hit and miss with them. We had one very good one that we trusted, and other ones we weren't so hot on. You could tell the ones that were good and the ones that were bad after a certain amount of time. So.
All right. And how much did you see of Afghan police or military there?
The Afghan police would man checkpoints throughout our area. They would, and I'm not really sure what they did day to day. They were supposed to be doing patrols. I'm not really sure how much they did. The Afghan army, we saw them not very often. Our area was very spread out. We didn't really see anybody besides ourselves and the locals. But there were times if we were doing a major operation, they would come with us, and they would usually be used to secure different points. Nothing too heavy. It's just better to do the heavy work ourselves.
All right. Now, were these the Afghan soldiers? Were they usually from other parts of the country, or could you not tell?
It was a mix. You had people that they brought in from Tajikistan, different, and some Uzbeks, and you had some from the lowlands, but nothing. It was hard to tell. We didn't spend a lot of time with the Afghan army at that. They were just not that useful to us, and their times in combat that we actually saw was nothing that we would ever. It was almost disgraceful, some of the things that happened, and so we never were really too fond of them. It was a nuisance to have them along your patrol. So they served their purpose, I guess, but I'm not really too sure about them.
Right. All right. Now, so how long do you stay in that area the whole time you're in the tour? Or do they move you around?
Well, we stayed in that area up until the time we were supposed to be going home, and about a week before we were supposed to go home, we found out we were going to be extended, and we were moved up north to Kunar Province, and we were instructed to find a place to build a new COP, and
What's a COP?
It's a combat outpost.
Okay.
Just basically some HESCOs and your Humvees, and you'd man that, and you'd run patrols from there. We were instructed to go find a place and make it ours. And that, so we went up to the Chowkay Valley, and we were bordering the Shuriak, the Pesh, the Korangal. It was a different type of terrain and different type of fighting than we'd been in some gunfights and such, but this was definitely, it got more intense once we got up there.
All right. Now, who was your opposition up there?
It was the Taliban, as far as we knew. There's probably some Salafians and Higgs running around up there, but mainly the Taliban. They could be locals. We did bump into some foreign fighters. You could kind of tell during different engagements, but we had the gauntlet of people, but it's pretty much the Taliban most of the time.
And how were they equipped?
The basics: RPGs and AKs, PKMs, man jams, and flip flops. You know, they're quick. They're moving very, very quick. They know the land, and they can set up an ambush extremely quickly. Some of them had heavier weapons, like a Dishka or Zeus, some of the old Russian hardware that would use to shoot down planes and helicopters, and they would turn those on us. And they had mortars, rockets. They were pretty well equipped.
All right. Now, does that really become more dangerous for you than the previous job, or about the same?
I think it was a lot more dangerous. The place that we built our COP was pretty much a fishbowl. We were surrounded on high ground. We were down in the bottom of a fishbowl. They would get up on the high ground and just let us have it. You need buckets to catch the lead. It was an everyday thing, sometimes up to 5 times a day. It was definitely a different experience out there.
Now, did you consider moving, or do you actually want to be a target?
We didn't want to be a target. It's not fun to be shot at. That was where we were placed. I know our chain of command fought it, but battalion wouldn't have it. We actually moved our first original COP to a different place that was probably about 200 meters back down this road, and we were still in very bad terrain. I don't think there really is a good place to have a COP there. We had OPs up on the high ground, but wound up having to pull them down. And
Because of observation posts.
Yep. You'd be up on the higher ground, a couple guys overwatching the cop, and our platoons were stretched so thin that we were running out of people.
And would the observation posts get attacked?
It would, and that was kind of scary. You're probably about 3 or 4 guys, 5, and you're kind of just sitting there, and your cop is probably 300 meters down a hill. You're kind of cut off at that point. Getting down would be extremely difficult, especially moving in a gunfight. So when you get hit, you kind of just have to buckle down and just superior firepower.
Okay. Now, where does the firepower come from?
We had crew serve weapons, our 50 cals, our Mark 19s. We had mortars at our cop who were dialed in on different areas where we knew we were going to get hit from. We also had artillery that were they would fire from different cops or larger fobs in our area. We had air power, which flew for us pretty frequently. Luckily, I think air power there is probably what has saved us many times.
Okay. Now, are these helicopters, jets, both?
Both. We had CAS and CCA. We had the Apaches, Godsons, and Apache Warthogs. We had the F-16s, fast movers. They loved the Apache pilots. Loved to come help us out. It's very gratifying to see them come on station and just lay it down. It's once actually the Taliban or the bad guys, they don't like to come out and play when there's air cover.
Yep.
As soon as that air cover leaves, you can guarantee that you're going to get hit. So it's pretty much the way things would go.
All right. Now, when you're in this second area, basically, would the enemy normally initiate contact, or?
Yep. They would climb up onto the high ground, usually from the same points that we'd already bracketed, and they'd hit us. And as time went on, their tactics got better. They would fire and maneuver, try to flank you, and the only way we would be able to keep them in check was through superior firepower, large amounts of mortars and CAS and or helicopters coming in, and it got hairy, but we managed to we held our ground, and I know we inflicted some injuries on them.
Okay. And about how long were you up there?
We were in the Chowkay for 6 months.
Okay. Over the course of that time, did the situation change much, other than the enemy getting a little more sophisticated?
No. It was pretty much Groundhog's Day. We'd rotate in and out of that place. We'd do 2 weeks out, come back for 5 days, and then go back for another 2 weeks. So we did have a respite. We would go to a slightly larger fob and kind of clean our weapons and have maybe 2 days to kind of just relax and decompress. And by that time, the platoon that I was with is extremely tight. Everybody took care of each other, and it is like a family. They have to be. And I was extremely lucky to have good guys and good leadership for the most part. So.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what kind of losses did you take?
We had some injuries. We had some gunshot wounds, shrapnel, things like that. We were very fortunate not to have anybody killed. Our sister companies were not so lucky. They had a lot of guys killed. We lost a couple of guys in IED strikes before. But while we were in the Pesh, while we were in the Chowkay, I'm not really sure how it happened, but we never had anybody killed. Considering what had been going on and what we were exposed to, it's nothing less than a miracle.
Okay. Now, at this stage, do you have body armor, that kind of thing?
Well, yeah, we always had body armor. We always had our helmets. We were lucky in that perspective, I guess. Technology had probably saved a lot of guys' lives. It's heavy, it's bulky, and whatever else, but it does its job. So
were you doing a lot of actually patrolling on foot?
We would walk out from our cop and we would patrol the surrounding area. We would do what we call KLEs. We would meet with the leaders of different villages and try to encourage them to get the Taliban to stop doing what they were doing. not really successful. The Taliban holds sway in a lot of those areas. They have a lot of power and fear and intimidation. They have no qualms about burning somebody's house down or executing somebody to make a point. And honestly, the people there think, you know, if they don't, even if they don't support the Taliban, they're still gonna be on their side. So you're caught in their country.
All right. Talk a little bit about just kind of the physical aspects of life there. For example, you know, what do you eat? Where do you sleep?
Well, if you're at your COP, you sleep inside your truck. Or you sleep on the ground. We take a very small backpack with us, usually with a smaller sleeping bag and whatever wet weather gear we needed, an extra uniform, socks, the basics of an infantryman. You eat your MREs. Some of us, we could have local food. They would you could buy it, and they would bring it to you. We would go out and do our patrols. It's pretty physically demanding, climbing up mountains and hills and wearing your kit. It'll take its toll on you. So you're pretty dirty, you're pretty sweaty, you're living very primitively. But that's part of the infantryman's pride, is we enjoy living rough. It may not seem fun at the time, but that's why we're there, and that's why we signed up, I guess.
Okay. Now, what kinds of weather did you have to deal with?
Oh boy, heat. We had the heat. We had monsoons. We had rain. We had dust storms. Before we went to Kunar Province, we had snow. So we had everything. I remember the monsoons were pretty bad, and the dust storms. But the heat was something I remember too. It got warm.
Now, how was the physical health of the men in terms of just dealing with disease or fatigue or things like that?
Everybody stayed pretty healthy. We were taking anti-malaria medicine, Primaquine, and a few others. As long as you made an effort to keep yourself clean, you could stay healthy. Dehydration is something we always watched. So always drinking water, always that'll actually keep you more healthy. We were, like I said, we were lucky. A lot of the guys, nobody really got sick. We had a couple guys go down, different illnesses, but for the most part, everybody stayed pretty healthy. And that goes to leadership, making sure your guys are taking their medicines, drinking water.
Now, do you have the same officers the whole time?
We switched platoon leaders probably 4 months in, but everybody else stayed the same. Different guys would get promoted, but you'd still stay the same job. You just got promoted. So yeah, our leadership structure didn't really change. So that was a good thing too.
Okay. So I don't know, how much did you see the company commander?
He would come out on battalion or company operations. He would normally stay at our FOB and run stuff from there. It was pretty much left up to the platoon sergeant and the platoon leader to run the COP that we were at. And that trickles down to the team leaders. And our higher-ups from battalion never really came. I think they may have been there once just to see what we had done with the place. But that was pretty much it. So you're pretty much on your own.
Now, what kind of experience did your platoon leaders and platoon sergeant have?
Our platoon leader was a college graduate. This was his first command. My platoon sergeant, on the other hand, was extremely well seasoned. He'd been everywhere. We trusted him implicitly. He is probably the reason that all the guys stayed safe. We even today, when we talk about him, he's like a god to us, and that's what a good platoon sergeant would be. When something was sketchy, he would tell the platoon leader, "Hey, my guys aren't going to do this. We're going to find another way to make this happen, but safely." He was getting ready to retire. I know he did not want any of his guys to get hurt. We made it this far, and he definitely looked out for us. And protected us. He was he was probably the best thing that platoon had.
Okay. Now, aside from going back to the FOB, the forward operating base, occasionally, did you get any other kind of breaks, or did you go to larger bases ever?
Nope. We would rotate back from the COP that we would have. We would go back to a place called Jalalabad. At that time, it was still pretty small, but it did have some amenities. Amenities to us is just a phone and a shower. We think we're living pretty large. And during that time, I think a lot of the guys, you have mail waiting for us, and that's a big deal. Or packages, whatever you get your hands on.
So when you're out in the field, you really don't have much contact with the outside world.
No, we did have a satellite phone, but it was too expensive really to call home. I think on Mother's Day, I think we each got a 2-minute phone call. That's the one I do remember having. But that was the only time that we really talked to our families, except for being back on at Jalalabad.
All right. And then during this first tour, did you get hurt yourself? Or?
I had my bell rung a few times. Got my hand crushed. And that was pretty much it.
But not crushed to the point where you couldn't use it?
No, I was down for a couple of weeks, and then I came back. So.
Okay. Now, did they send you to a hospital or just the FOB? And that?
I went back to my FOB, got some stitches. I sat and pulled radio watch for a couple of weeks, and then I went back to my platoon.
All right. Okay, so are there other incidents out of that tour that kind of stand out in your mind, or things that you remember from that?
Not particularly. It all kind of blended together, being there for so long. We had I think one of the best memories we had was Christmas. We'd come back from a patrol and we played mud football, and actually being inside for Christmas, we had a whole day to sleep and to kind of chill out, and that's something that infantry guys love. If they're not, and they have the time, they're just gonna decompress. So I think I remember times like that. Nothing. It all just kind of blends together.
And how did you characterize morale within the unit over the course of that time?
Like everybody else, there's ebbs and lows, or ebbs and highs. There especially when we found out we were getting extended. I think our platoon took it. I wouldn't say they took it well, but nobody ever lost it. Everybody, I think it was just one of those things that there's nothing you can do about it. It's all beyond your control. Our platoon sergeant did a really good job of checking up on us and talking to us and making sure. He made sure that week we had, before we went to our new up in the Kunar, that week was ours. That we just kind of did whatever we wanted. So we were lucky. There were some incidents of suicide, not in our unit, but in some of the other people, and it was actually funny. The infantry guys just kind of took it stoically, but everybody else kind of panicked and cried. And it's not their fault. It's just, I think we just had a tighter support structure inside our platoons than they did.
Yeah.
And we all just kind of.
Now, when the battalion's sort of out there in the field, how much of a tail do they have? Do you have a lot of support personnel who were out there on the main bases?
They all stayed on the main bases for the most part. Infantry platoons are self-sufficient. There's not much we really need to be besides being resupplied.
Right.
The larger cops, they'll have their headquarters guys, the guys who do the radios, cooks, armorers. We did have intelligence guys come out to us sometimes. We had our mortars that were attached to us, but that's pretty much all I could really see. But I know, the bigger bases is where you're going to see the tail. You're going to see the logistics and all the stuff coming in and going out, and it's a heavy process.
All right. Okay, so you get to it's an 18-month tour in the end. Okay, what happens at the end of that?
Well, we finally were relieved by the 173rd out of Vincenzo, and we packed up our stuff and went home.
Okay. Now, are you going back to Fort Drum?
Yep, we flew back to Fort Drum. Got back in June of 2007, and we had 2 weeks to be with our families, and then we went back to Fort Drum, and the training started again.
Okay. And you really hadn't had much training with them before you'd gone over, because you had on-the-job training instead.
Right.
So now, how do you spend your days on Fort Drum?
Well, at first we got a lot of new soldiers in, so my job was I had become a team leader at the time, and I was getting them introduced to life in the Army. And at the time, we'd actually been slotted to go to Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of our training had been geared to go to Iraq,
Mm-hmm.
and that changed. We were going to go back to Afghanistan. So the battalion was, our training focus changed. And so that the day-to-day job of an infantryman is to train, but unless you're in the field, you don't do a lot of training. You do a lot of paperwork. You do a lot of classroom stuff. It's really boring. And the team leaders are with their guys, squad leaders doing paperwork, getting stuff laid on for more, doing inspections. It's pretty much Garrison Army life, and a lot of soldiers struggle with that, especially coming back from deployments where you don't have that kind of rigid structure.
Mm-hmm.
So,
all right. But to a certain extent, is it mostly sort of a 9-to-5 job or something like that?
depends on what you were doing at the time. It could be sometimes you'd be out in the field for a couple days or a week. Sometimes you just had classroom stuff.
What goes into what do you do in a classroom?
The classroom is once you find out that you're going to Afghanistan, you start doing language classes. You start you start looking at terrain. You start learning different things that you're going to need to know in order to interact with the people. First aid stuff, the basics. Some of us go further on to get certified EMT. We'll do just all different types of things that you're going to need to know. But a lot of it comes from the guys who have been there and passing on that common sense type knowledge of things that they're going to need to know once they get there. And you will go off post. You'll go to places like JRTC or NTC to do large scale training. So it takes up a lot of time, and before you know it, you're getting ready to go back to wherever you're at.
Okay, now do you get liberty, get to go off base and do stuff?
Yeah, I mean, if you're not working or on the weekends, Fort Drum is in the middle of nowhere, so you'd have to go to Syracuse to have any fun. My platoon we lost a lot of our guys. I think there was a core group of us still left, and after that, we partied as a platoon. We stayed together as a platoon. We always looked out for each other. Never had any problems. We just kept it within the family, and that seemed to work out. We never had discipline problems. We never had soldiers getting arrested for drinking and driving or drug use or whatever else. A lot of people had problems with that. We didn't. Like I said, we kept a pretty tight leash on everybody, but we still managed to have fun.
Okay. Now, had your platoon sergeant gone out by this time?
He'd retired, and we had one replace him. So he wasn't the same. I don't think anybody could have come close to that guy. I think it was a change, and all the new guys who were leaders were still trying to figure out how to be a leader. A lot of it is common sense, but in the Garrison Army, there's a lot more attention to detail as far as paperwork goes, as far as layouts go, as far as the stuff that gets monotonous that you really don't like to do. You don't get to spend as much time with your guys training as you'd want to. That kind of falls on your team leaders.
And the skill set really are the things that you get praised for, but might be a different bunch of things from what you actually need when you're out there.
Right, and being in Afghanistan is different than being. Obviously, it's different than being in Garrison. It's prim proper, and you're in the Army, and that's it. A lot more opportunities for guys to get into trouble. A lot more opportunities for guys to slip up. But the Army does a really good job of keeping you focused and keeping you primed and ready to go for your next generation, especially the veterans. Okay. You don't ever forget those skills.
Okay. So when do you go back to Afghanistan?
We went back in 2009. I'd actually moved from my weapons company to the Scouts, and I was a Scout team leader at the time, and it was a different set of missions, different type of work environment, and definitely a new experience.
Yeah. Now you mentioned that after you got back, you lost a lot of your unit men's enlistments complete, and they leave the Army?
Guys left the Army, guys went to different duty stations. That happens, and then you have a cycle of getting in new guys, and that's, I guess it's interesting. A lot of them are not really sure what to expect, just like you were when you showed up.
So new guys really are, in most cases, new rather than
yeah.
transferred from someone else's
Yeah,
unit?
they were new. We'd have some guys coming in who'd been sent to the 10th Mountain from other units, but usually they were new.
Okay.
Right out of basic training.
So what proportion of your company do you think were men who had been on the previous tour?
Oh, probably 60%,
Okay.
maybe so. It's maybe a little bit less. We were the leadership that we had were all experienced for the most part. Our soldiers on our line weren't.
Okay.
So there was a few of them who were, but not that many.
All right. Okay. So now where do you go to in Afghanistan when you go back?
We went actually back to the same place. We went to Kunar, but our AO had expanded a little bit more. We were up in Nuristan now, which is the province above. And we had the terrain was definitely more mountainous. It's actually green trees and rivers, and the way people lived had changed a little bit too. We're very, very isolated. The Taliban definitely had their claws into that area. They're only 15 kilometers from Pakistan, so it's a very easy trip to make through the mountains, and they could bring in reinforcements fairly quickly. They could hit us and then go back. It all just, it was, I guess, a great working environment for them.
All right, describe a little bit now. You said you're now with a scout unit. What are you doing?
Our job is to collect intelligence and surveillance and do whatever battalion task is out to do. You go in before everybody else. You want to make sure that where you're going is permissible for company operations or battalion operations. You want to see what you're going to be dealing with. That's pretty much the job of the scouts.
Okay. And how do you get around?
Helicopter.
Okay.
We get inserted to whatever we needed to go, and we'd walk. And then we'd walk back out and get picked up. Or sometimes a company would pick us up on a road or whatever else.
Okay. And what sorts of things do you encounter when you're out there?
Everything. I mean, we encountered locals, we encountered bad guys, wildlife, everything. It's different. You're operating on a much smaller set of guys, so you kind of know that you have to be careful about the types of engagements you choose to get yourself into. And actually, it's better not to be engaged at all.
Yeah.
But we found ourselves getting thrown in with line companies and doing different jobs for them. So.
Well, what sort of job would you do for a line company?
We just do the reconnaissance work for them, the intelligence work. There's places that had a sniper problem, and that would become our problem. We would try to locate them. That would be one of we spend a lot of time doing that, actually, in certain places.
Okay. Now, would they usually know you're coming?
Helicopters usually give it away.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's any quiet way of getting anywhere without having to walk a long distance. And even if you do walk a long distance, the human intelligence network that the bad guys have in place, there's no way to really show up unannounced. I think once you set foot into somewhere, they know you're coming. They're just not really sure where, but you can be assured that you are being watched the whole time.
Okay. Now, how many men in a scout team?
We had up to 6. We would just keep it nice and tight. And we'd be embedded with a light company, and we would do our jobs from there.
Okay. So you would not normally be out in the field all by yourselves too long?
There were times where we were, but usually we'd be with a line company, which we preferred.
Now, did you get ambushed or just sniped at? Or
depends on where we were. The fighting in our second time around was almost more intense than it was the first time. That's actually when a lot of the things that made the news now, places like Barge Matal, Barley, Cop Keating, where those past 2 Medal of Honors winners were. That's where we we were on the QRF for that. Barge Matal, I know, made the news. We were there for two months. Cleared out the town of the Taliban right before the elections, and then stayed there, occupying the town.
Okay. Now that's a little bit different from some of the things you've been doing earlier.
Yeah.
All right. If you're occupying a town, what kind of rules do you follow? How do you conduct yourselves?
Barge Matal was different. It's hard to explain. It was a bad place. A lot of bad things happened there. The rules changed a little bit. They actually lifted our ROE a little bit higher to where we could defend ourselves a little bit more properly. At the time, ISAF had really put the handcuffs on us and not let us defend ourselves the way we were used to.
It's the ROE being rules of engagement.
Rules of engagement,
Yeah.
yeah. When ISAF took over, they really changed how we could. The tactics that we would use were impacted by ISAF. We used to be able to.
What is ISAF?
International Security Assistance Force. It's the governing body that controls coalition forces in Afghanistan. They're the ones who make the rules on what we do and how we conduct ourselves. And we always follow the rules of land warfare. However, there were times where we could be a little bit more aggressive, and that needed to be done because the way our enemy was acting. We needed to show them that we're here, we're not going to play around with you, and it's better for our security if we just put the fear of God into them. ISAF came along and really put the screws down on us. But in Barge Matal, that changed. Our ROE was lifted to the point where we could be a little bit more aggressive again. And in that kind of place you needed to be.
Okay. Now, if you're going to get the Taliban out of a place, how do you do that?
Physically go get them. Root them out. And that was an urban environment, so that literally meant going house to house.
Okay. How do you know who's Taliban and who's not?
You don't.
So do you just round up all the men, or what do you do?
Well, in that town, most of the populace had cleared out. There were a few exceptions, but when we went in, anywhere where you took fire from, that's where the Taliban were. That place was extremely hostile, and rooting them out was our #1 focus. Securing the town, making it safe for the civilians to come back. It was towns divided by a river, 2 sides. We controlled both sides after we cleared out the town. And there were outlying areas where were perfect hiding spots for bad guys. It was surrounded by cornfields. It was a tricky spot. So.
But did people come back into the town?
No, they didn't. So we wound up occupying the town. There were a few people there, but we occupied the town. We also had Afghan border police with us, some elements of the Afghan army, but it was mainly just us.
Were the Afghans any more impressive than they were before?
Well, in Barge Matal, there was foreign fighters. They definitely brought their A game. With Pakistan being so close, they were able to get reinforcements to their positions very quickly. It's just as fast as you could kill them, there'd be more there. Every day was, and that was another place where we were in the low ground, surrounded by high ground, and we had our OPs up, but even still, it was very mountainous, so finding them was hard. Our line companies did an excellent job of trying to secure it, but you can't put out every fire. So eventually, you just have that turtle mentality. You have to button up and kind of just take things as they come.
Great. Now, what kind of losses are you taking now?
Barge Matal, we lost 3 guys. We had a lot of wounded. I don't remember the exact number, but I know 3 guys were killed. And that was just on the American side. There was a lot more Afghans that were killed. Some international forces that we had there. There were some wounded and a couple guys killed. So
what international forces?
we had Latvians with us.
Okay.
So that was pretty cool. They were working with the Afghan army. So they would go out with the Afghans and lead their patrols, and then they would come back. And they were based out of where our battalion headquarters were at the time. So we got to work with them.
And what impression did you have of the Latvians?
They're pretty cool guys. They like to fight, and they're pretty hardcore. They sound like Arnold Schwarzenegger on the radio. They are good at what they do. I don't think they like being with the Afghans, but they're good at what they do. So.
It's not a group that you hear much about necessarily as being over there.
No, there's a lot of you'd be surprised about the different countries that have been in Afghanistan. The Koreans have been there, Egyptians, Saudis, the Brits, obviously, the Germans. The French Foreign Legion has a very large impact down south. So you have a lot of different countries in and out of that place.
All right. And how long are you over there this time?
We were only there for a year, so we were lucky.
Okay. We're just going to go back to sort of where we got interrupted by our technical difficulty. I was asking you, okay, so what different sorts of foreign contingents were there besides the Latvians?
The Latvians were there, the Germans, the Brits, the French, South Koreans, Egyptians, the French Foreign Legion was there. They don't consider themselves French anyway.
Well, they're not.
Yeah, their officers are, but they're a group of hard charters who were down in the south. The Germans were up north a little bit. But you had a lot of different countries in and out of there. Canadians, too. So, yeah, a lot of people.
All right. Now, let's see. So we were actually talking while we were in a break just a little bit about sort of what they do with IEDs. I mean, where they'd put them or how they'd hide them.
They'd put them anywhere. Trees, the roads, obviously, piles of trash, animal carcasses. They'd bury them deep. They'd use decoy ones, and then they'd sucker you in with the decoy and hit you with a real one. It could be anything. They're very creative with them. It's very scary. That's an unknown threat. You can't always react to it. Besides, punching through and making sure that everybody's okay.
Now, to what extent were you able to spot them or avoid them, as opposed to just run into them?
Spotting them is really hard to do. Anything could be an IED, so it's better just to take safety measures. I think it's one of those. I think a lot of those moments just come to driving past something that you thought might have been suspicious and just kind of being uptight and pretty much scared. They're very hard to spot. There are some telltale signs. Usually, if you can spot one, that's a decoy, and they're going to hit you with something else later. There's a method to their madness. So, yeah.
All right. Now, what kind of sense did you have of what your mission was or why you were there?
Well, the job of the infantryman is pretty simple. We secure an area and we hold it. We get the bad guys. That's our job. It's a very, we're tasked with taming different areas, different sectors, clearing out the bad guys. That's what we do. As far as it ever being accomplished, I'm not really sure we could ever draw the line, because as soon as we'd leave, the bad guys would come back. It's a hit and miss thing with them. I mean, you could kill as many of them as you wanted, but they're still going to be there. And they know that the time that the U.S. has is limited. And people forget that there is a war in Afghanistan going on, even right now. So I think the Afghans have a saying, you may have the watches, but we have the time, and they're very patient, and they will wait. So they know what they're doing. They've never been defeated yet. So.
Yeah. And sort of was that kind of awareness, does that affect the morale of the unit, or do you just put that aside?
And none of the politics really matter. I think when it comes down to it is you're there, and there's no way out. So you got to do the job the best you can.
Okay. Now, how well did the new guys adjust? Because you had a lot of new infantrymen coming in.
It takes time for everybody to adjust. I think once you've been there for a little bit, you kind of get the feel for what's going on in the day-to-day life of inside your platoon. most guys catch on pretty quick, and the team leaders stay up on them, making sure that they get what they need to do done, and showing them more effective ways to carry their kit or pack their rucks or things to look out for, and it's very important to teach them these different types of skills. Very simple infantry jobs that you learned in Garrison become a lot simpler in Afghanistan. It's very common sense driven. So at least, I mean, a lot of guys catch on pretty quick.
All right. Now, when you're in a place like this, how aware are you of what's going on in the rest of the world?
No, if you go back to your fob, then I mean, they have armed forces network, so you'd have the news on. I remember seeing the Fort Hood shooting. That's the one event I do remember coming across the TV. We had a very limited sense of what was going on. Nothing too crazy.
But you're not in a situation where you can email home, or
if you went back to your main fob, you had access to email and phones. So that would be depending on where you were at the time or how long your missions were. That could be up to a month before you got back and actually got to do that. And your mail would be waiting for you and all that stuff. Hopefully, catch some downtime.
A little different question. What proportion of the men in your company you think were married?
Well, less than half. I couldn't really say.
Did you notice much difference in terms of how they acted or held up, or?
Well, obviously they had a lot more on their minds than us single soldiers. I think it was really hard to watch them try to be there for their families when they couldn't physically be there. Some were lucky enough to be back in the refit for a son's birthday or wife's birthday or whatever, and were able to call or say hello. But I know it definitely took a toll on them. And during your deployment, you had 2 weeks of leave coming to you, so you'd go home for 2 weeks and then you'd be coming back.
Okay. Now, did you do that?
I did. It's not optional. You go.
Okay.
I went to Las Vegas both times. So I had a great time. I did see my family before that, but I went to Las Vegas.
Well, you just let off some steam.
Yeah, we definitely let off some steam. A lot of guys go. It's hard. It's hard coming back. It's definitely a culture. You literally could be back in the States within 72 hours of being in Afghanistan, and that's incredible. I remember flying into Phoenix to see my mom during my second rotation, and it was incredible to be back. It was weird. I don't know, Arizona looks a lot like Afghanistan in some places, but it's definitely coming back is hard. You're always got your guys on your mind. I don't think you ever really leave Afghanistan. No matter how much fun you're having, you're always worried about your guys and your friends back there. So I don't think your mindset really ever changed.
But if you're focused on that, then going back isn't as bad as it might be otherwise.
No. I think it's almost kind of a relief to be back. At least for me, it was. I enjoyed seeing my family and enjoyed being away, but you kind of that responsibility of everything going on. It always weighs on you. On coming back is. But once you're back, you're why did I want to be back so badly?
All right. So as your rotations, your tour is coming to an end, the second tour there, do you get to the point where you're kind of counting the days? Are they telling you when you're going? Or?
Well, there's two very dangerous points in a deployment, the very beginning and the very end. That's when you experience the most casualties. Guys get complacent towards the end. Everybody's so focused on, they're seeing the farm and they're ready to go, and they lose focus. So you got to make sure your guys stay on that. But on the same hand, you're just as excited. And you start to get information trickling in when your replacement units start showing up, start seeing the different patches. You're you're getting close, and you're starting to pack up your kit and get it ready to ship home. It's coming, and guys are making arrangements to take vacations or go do this or buy cars or whatever. It's definitely a mixed emotions. Coming home is it should be a happy experience, and for it is good, but it's definitely different. It's a culture shock again.
Now, when the unit comes back together, right? I mean,
You come back in staggered elements, but the battalion moves back together. It's just everybody kind of. It's about over a week and a half process, 2 weeks for everybody, the whole battalion to be back.
Okay.
And we've already had guys on our advance party there to kind of set up stuff for us and make sure our billets are ready. And
now, do you get some kind of official welcome when you come back? Or?
Well, they fly you at Fort Drum. You'll fly to the RDF, the airport at Fort Drum, and you'll take a bus to McGrath Gym, and you'll march in with your chalk, and your families will be in the stands. And it is kind of a surreal experience. And after that, you're released to your families, and you go secure your gear. You get it to wherever you're going. You know, then you're given. You got to come. You got 48 hours from immediately when you get back, and then after those 48 hours are over, you report back in for work, and you start you get two weeks after that, but you have some stuff to do before that.
All right. Now, when do you actually get back from the second tour?
When did we get back? I got back in March of 2010.
Okay. And how much time did you have left in your enlistment at that point?
I'd already been stop lost.
All right.
So at that time, I was looking at different options of getting out or staying in, and decided to get out.
Okay. Now, how interested were they in having people stay in at that point?
At that time, they wanted to retain a lot of the experienced NCOs. They wanted, or myself and a few others were offered slots as drill instructors or as recruiters, or going to different other jobs. Some of us were selected to go to SF selections or Ranger School or other places. And a lot of us, I think, we were just burned out by that time. Had enough, and a lot of my friends were already gone, and I didn't want to be the lone guy there.
Yeah.
There was a few other guys who were there, but I felt as though I needed, it was my time to kind of end it, and yeah.
All right. So then after you're discharged, then now what do you do?
That was a good question. I wasn't really sure. The military had that was the only thing I'd really known since I was a kid, and I tried to go to school, and then it didn't work out so well, so I kind of just played around for a little bit and tried to figure out what was going on, and eventually just kind of realized it's time to grow up and get back to being something, and got back into school. And
all right. Now, what kind of support does the military or VA or ever what gets offered to you when you come back?
Nah, slim to none. They say that they're there, but it takes you actually searching for those answers yourself, kind of getting there and finding out if you want to get counseling or something like that. It's pretty much up to you to seek help. The VA, as everyone knows, is not inefficient but troubled. So I mean, getting your school benefits was fairly easy. That is a big advantage that we have over civilians. But on the other side of that, for medical compensation or stuff like that, it's an uphill battle the whole time. There are other organizations like Wounded Warrior that do a much better job of helping. It's just the VA is a bureaucracy. And
now, when you were sort of processing out and doing the paperwork to get discharged, I mean, do they have some kind of orientation for you or an explanation of what the benefits or options are or what's available?
You have a 2-day class where you're still in uniform, but they're telling you that you're a civilian, and they kind of just they tell you that you're a civilian now, and you should go to school or go get a job somewhere, but I think a lot of those guys are so. A lot of us have just come back from Afghanistan, so all the stuff that they're telling us is just falling on deaf ears. We're just,
So there's not really anything in place to help you actually make that transition.
The Army has a program. It's just when you're out processing. There's a lot more on your mind than just sitting there in this classroom, or you know, you're more focused on, well, can I turn in my gear now? Or
Yeah.
can I go get this signed? Or, you know, when can I go get my DD-214 signed? It's you know, I'm ready. You're ready to get out. And so when you're released, you're released. I think it was the strangest feeling I ever had was walking out the gates of Fort Drum for the last time, and trying to figure out what I was going to do. And a lot of my friends have had the same experience. They're kind of just figuring out where they need to be in their lives. My best friend just, you know, decided, he struggled for a little bit, and now he's in school, and that's kind of been his balance. And the same for me. I just go to school, and that's that.
Yeah. And I don't know, what kind of reception have you had in the civilian community if people find out you were there or whatever?
I try to keep that pretty low. Some of my professors have really made it easy for me to talk to them if I'm, you know, having problems or whatever. But amongst my classmates, I try to keep that fairly low profile. You know, that's part of being a veteran. I do belong to different veterans organizations. That's where I spend my time. I want to be amongst my own, but any other time, I just try to keep it a low profile.
All right. And do you encounter a lot of Vietnam vets in some of these groups?
I do. I belong to a VFW, and I know a lot of Vietnam vets from there. So yeah, there's the ones that have been in my shoes. I tend to get along with, and we can relate to each other. We're just a different generation of guys coming home.
Do you think that the society generally treats you decently compared to maybe what those guys got? Or?
I think that our reception was probably better. Unfortunately, with the stigma of being a Vietnam vet, when they returned home was very unfortunate. You know, those guys were just doing a job, just like we were. It was, you know, things like 9/11, you know, the war on terror, you know, made public support a little bit more popular. But even now, it's with the war in Iraq, everything kind of just went down.
Okay. When you're trying to do things like look for a job, is it a plus or a minus to be a veteran, do you think?
I've heard mixed things about that. For an infantryman, we don't have skills that translate to a civilian. I mean, we have leadership and stuff like that, but we don't. You know, nobody's interested in what you can do with a rifle, or you know, you can clear out room or something. It's so we kind of pad our. If we were going to apply for a job, it's more we focus on the leadership aspects of it. That's where we leave it. Some jobs are more marketable than others. I just picked the wrong one.
All right. To look back on the time that you spent in the service, how do you think that affected you overall?
Well, it definitely made me much more aware of what we have in this country as opposed to others. Definitely very thankful to be here, and definitely have a lot of respect for the men and women who actually do the job, and definitely much more aware of things around you, and how you interact with people. For younger veterans coming home, I think they tend to isolate, and they only feel comfortable around their own kind. Especially combat veterans, they have to be around their own kind in order to feel a part of that family again. And that's the biggest struggle, is kind of picking up life where you left off. I think people here, for the most part, are pretty appreciative, but I think they have forgotten that there is a conflict still going on, and guys are still getting hurt and getting killed over in Afghanistan. So that's important for people to remember.
All right. Well, you do a good job of telling a story, so I'd just like to thank you for coming and sharing that today.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
I never seen such desolation. I think we drove for a mile and there wasn't a building hardly standing.
Nobody knew what was going on. They called the situation fluid, but fluid means that nobody knew anything.
It was different. If I had done something else, I don't know what I would have done.